Hello, my name is Ebony Williams, and this is We Interrupt This Program. So today we are going to do something a little different, and instead of talking about The Last of Us, we will be talking about Tucker and Dale versus the evil.
Versus evil, yeah.
Versus evil. I had a time trying to get that. I was like, it's not Evil Dead. I remembered Dale, but I didn't remember Tucker, but I saw the movie.
Okay, good. And I'm Vern Cooper, and I chose Tucker and Dale versus Evil. If you saw the way we're choosing our things now, we're letting fate decide a little bit, but we're also steering the hand of fate. So we pick the things. We each pick some things and put on a wheel, and I picked this one. Like Ebony said, it is different than the content we've been doing. Like it's very different than The Last of Us, but it's also kind of different than anything we've done so far because we've been casually putting out content for a couple years now, and the other films we've done have been Hollywood big budget things. And if anyone listening is familiar with Tucker and Dale versus Evil, you know that it is very much not that. It is a cult film, folks describe it, even though it did debut at Sundance.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, and so I chose Tucker and Dale versus Evil for a few reasons. I really love this movie, but fans of horror movies, especially fans like our age, we remember when horror was not always, we didn't have the A24s, we didn't have the Blumhouses, right? It was schlock, it was B movies, it was anybody could make a horror movie, and that was kind of what was fun about it. They were a very like liberated space. And Tucker and Dale is, I don't know if you call it a B movie, but it is definitely something different than the kinds of where horror lives now in the year 2025 is it has some status that it didn't have back in 2010 or 2009 when this thing went into pre-production.
Really? You think so?
I do. But yeah, I mean, what do you recall about that time?
Actually, not even that time. I'm thinking about before that time. So before that time, I'm thinking about movies like The Ring or what, but I guess those, I wouldn't necessarily call The Ring a B movie,
Uh-uh.
but there was The Ring. There was the one with the guy, the people are stranded at this hotel and then people just start dying. Which one is that? Is that Identity?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, around that time, I was in my master's program and we would go see horror movies quite
Hmm.
a bit. So those are just a few I remember from that time.
Yeah, horror movies have always existed, and there have always been some that make it to the box office.
Hmm.
So let's talk about that. Like, what are the if we could create some an overview, some archetypes of what films from the 90s were celebrated as perhaps like, elevated art, things that someone might mention that could get an Academy nod or something.
I don't know. I would necessarily point to anything from that time. I don't know. Maybe I just have this idea about horror now, like bringing in things about race, like having that connection between race and horror or misogyny and
Hmm.
horror. I feel like I'm seeing that a lot more now
Yeah.
than I saw then.
And horror now has moved into a place that's, I think, more appreciated by general audiences. Um, and I think maybe that gives it a little bit more to do. Um, Horror used to be kind of fringe and kind of niche. And the things that were so, and the examples that we gave earlier, like the things that did go to box office and did like make what we might call like prestige money, they weren't slashers.
Hmm.
They weren't the more grotesque, right? I remember the example of The Fly, that Cronenberg film.
Mm,
Cronenberg is a good example of the kind of disgusting horror filmmaker that like highbrow film people were allowed to like. And so he was often like the example that proves the rule. Is What's that expression?
the exception
Exce-
to the rule.
yeah, exception that proves the rule. Yeah, like no, 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 horror can be great. Look at the things Cronenberg does.
Yeah.
But that film was, but like, what do people remember it for? It's the special effects.
I think I remember it for the story get told.
I don't.
For me, the story was about obsession.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
It's about like knowing your limits, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And also and so to go back to your point about how much more explicitly horror is doing identity work now and cultural commentary work, it has always done that. Horror has always been a place where those things are explored, but now it's explored more formally and explicitly because there's a more general average audience that enjoys horror now. Now in the summertime, and we're moving into that time now, and I'm really excited about it. It's just horror movie after horror movie. We've got competing studios. That's
Oh yeah, yeah,
insane. We've got
yeah.
we've got production companies and studios that mainly do horror. There are also within horror a lot of different kinds of horror.
Mhm.
There's the monster kind, there's the ghosty kind, there's the slasher kind. I mean, there's genre within genre. The thing about Tucker and Dale, it's an example of a comedy horror, which is
Mhm.
also a very specific kind of genre. Trying to think of examples of this aesthetic, I guess, this tone of voice of comedy horror. A lot of folks would put this film in conversation or in context with Cabin in the Woods.
I've never seen Cabin in the Woods.
It's good.
I think I've never seen Cabin in the Woods because it sounds too much like The House at the End of the Street, and that movie just sounds.
It's bad. That is a yeah, trigger
Yeah,
warning all over that one.
I don't want to watch that.
No, Cabin in the Woods is it does similar things that this one does. But there are others. So I'm thinking of Zombieland. Zombieland is kind of
I loved
yeah,
Zombieland.
me too.
Yeah, I enjoyed that one.
That was a little bit between that comedy and horror place, and that came at the high water mark of the post 9/11 zombie renaissance. For me, anyway, that movie epitomizes that whole arc of the post 9/11 zombie boom, and I think also that zombie renaissance after 9/11 unlocked some other things for horror to be able to do because we really saw things begin to open up and change. Horror diversified in a way it never had before, and
Mhm.
it diversified, it proliferated, it ran the box offices, it was at the theaters, a variety of horror at the theaters.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
And this was even the Netflix effect hadn't even happened yet. The Netflix
Yeah.
effect was a couple years later. So I've picked Tucker and Dale, I think, because it is a time and a place in film, in a shift in film
Mhm.
trends, and it's not asking big questions about race. It's asking some questions about class, but not a ton. It's asking questions about class regionality. It is asking questions about prejudice, that's a superpower that horror has.
Yeah.
It can ask big questions in a really digestible and accessible way. But there's some other things about it that I was really invested in the time that I saw this. A lot of movies imprint on me at the time I watched them because of where I am mentally. So this movie came out about a year and a half after David died,
Mm,
and had just started grad school
mhm.
and was in this like in between place with higher education, being a redneck myself, but and feeling like an outsider, but trying to be in higher ed, trying to be in a white collar space, also coming to terms with like masculinity. I think there's some really cool stuff with masculinity in here between Tucker
Yeah,
and
it
Dale.
is. It is.
Yeah.
It is. I usually watch movies with the captions on. Like, I enjoy, even when I'm reading, I enjoy listening to the audio while reading. Somebody said something about it being immersive. I don't know if it's immersive, but I think more than anything, it just, I don't know, just because of my eye issues and all of this stuff, like, I just enjoy being able to kind of read what I'm hearing. So I was watching, and it scene where they're at the store, and he's like, run that list back to me.
Yeah.
I was like, did he say lubricated condoms? He totally said lubricated. I was like, if you fixing up the house, why do you need lubricated
I
condoms?
don't think that's what he said.
I'm telling you, he said lubricated condoms.
I think it did sound like that. And I wonder if they chose that for a reason, but it was lubricated. It was some construction,
Oh,
but it sounded like that. Because there's gay jokes about Tucker and
yeah.
Dale in this. And at first I was like, oh boy, but they never felt mean.
No, they didn't. They didn't.
They were in on it.
Yeah, yeah. They also it just I don't know. I was also like wondering like what's the place for that? Like why? Yeah, I mean not that it was out of place or offensive or anything.
That's a great question because one of the things that could amplify an experience of watching these kinds of movies is understanding the tropes. So Tucker and Dale, Cabin in the Woods, a lot of these Zombieland, all these comedy horror films, their bread and butter is taking standard tropes of horror and fucking them up, like flipping
Uh-huh.
them over, interrupting, right? It's a disruption. And so if you think about the movie Deliverance,
Mhm.
they're not just killer rapist hillbillies, they're gay, right? They don't
Mhm.
just, so like the true perversion of them is that they rape a man instead of a woman. And that is referenced in this. The college kids
We are in hillbilly country now, boys. Squeal out,
in the
Oh.
car. And so,
Huh.
and for Tucker and Dale to be so affectionate as like male friends, at the very beginning, Tucker and Dale are driving to the cabin and Tucker drops his beer in his in his lap. And and Dale's like, "Don't worry, I got you." And he gets his shirt caught, and the police pull him over. It's a lot of physical comedy. It's a lot of pratfalls, but it's also queer because it looks like he's performing oral sex on him.
Yeah, yeah.
And in that moment, neither of them shows any embarrassment.
They're oblivious to how others
Yeah.
could perceive them, which I think is another thing that this movie is getting at,
Mhm.
you know, how other people see you. And I'm struggling with something. This idea of blaming someone for how they present. When Dale talks to the college kids and he has the scythe in his hand,
Yes.
and I'm like, why would you talk to somebody? Of course they're gonna think something's wrong with you. You have a scythe in your hand. But then I was like, okay, maybe that's another thing. Like,
And so I watched this with Sabrina on the
mhm.
phone, and I said that. I said, "Why did he take his scythe with him?" And she said, "Well, he's nervous. He wants something in
Yeah,
his hand. It was nearby." From our context, that's a creepy weapon. From his, he's simply going to work.
Going camping?
yeah, yeah.
It's the place where meaning gets confused sometimes is we are not familiar with each other's contexts.
Right, right. And and it's that thing about perception
Hmm.
again,
Yeah.
right? So interesting.
Yeah, I think another thing that I like about it is there's a lot of just like love yourself and have faith in
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of that.
Yeah.
So are we gonna go chronologically
We
or we
could we could
just
do a couple of, yeah, let's hit the high points, I guess.
okay, okay.
Yeah. We open actually with a found footage trope. The reporter. Do you recall like the credits? Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so what was going on there?
So if you recall, like at the very end of the movie, that's the reporter who's like doing the to camera piece.
Yeah,
But
but
so
who was the person that killed her?
it's the college kid. What's his name? Chad. He survived. There was a whole hubbub, right? Everybody was like, "There's going to be a sequel," and the reason I think we all thought that was because Chad survived. But I don't think that that's what they intended. I think that they just wanted to do that because it's a common trope. Is like you think the killer's dead, but they actually survive and they come back. Think about how Michael Myers and Jason are always.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I remember watching it and I was like, I kept looking to figure out who this other person was, but then I was like, okay, like it just didn't occur to me
Yeah.
that that's who that was.
That's who that was. And then
Okay.
brief poking fun at the found footage craze. And then we meet these college kids.
I think one thing that really occurred to me is how animated they got about forgetting the beer.
Yeah, that was just, like they're fueled by beer. What are they going to do?
It was hilarious to me. I was like, wow. Okay, and then you're going on this trip. Why would you forget the beer?
How did you even do that? Yeah.
How did you do that?
And
Yeah.
there's so many of them. That was funny to me too. They're crammed in this vehicle.
Like a clown car.
And like you think you've seen the last row of them, and then another one pops up out the back. There's so many moments of physical comedy in this that that are to do with like the film, like the framing also, like what we see. I don't, it's been a long time since we talked about this, but that's mise en scène. And so horror movies, they fuck with mise en scène to great effect. And the scene where they first actually see one another, they first perceive one another, is very funny because we get it from the college kid's perspective. And what do
Mhm.
Tucker and Dale look like from that perspective?
Yeah.
The two performances given by Alan Tudyk and Tyler Labine are very like they're doing this like really like vacant, slack jawed, like they're relaxed. You know, they're not putting on airs. They're just who they are. We know we're talking about film tropes, but what were the kids thinking? What was informing their perspective on those two?
I mean, already these presumptions about us versus them, hillbilly, by that point, they had already done squeal like a pig thing,
That's
right?
exact. Yeah, that's what I was just about
Yeah.
to say. I think that's when they did it.
Yeah. So I would say that that would be one of the things that informs their perspective. This idea about perception, right? And how it doesn't always come from us. It doesn't always come from our experience. Chad was living with something based on what he was told by somebody else.
Mhm.
Like, so that's where his perception came from. And I found that really interesting.
That's exactly what's being problematized here. If we can say
Mm-hmm.
anything is being problematized, it's prejudice, it's preconception, but we're also allowing for the fact that none of us asked to have the prejudices that we have. And
Mm-hmm.
I teach a course on the fact that we are all given prejudices. We are all prejudiced. We all have and participate in all the isms because simply by the fact that they exist and we exist within a context that they exist in, right? It's like we can't fix that. It's our job to identify and argue with them and counter them whenever they begin to influence our actions and stuff. Very quickly after this, they realized they forgot the beer because this is their
Mm-hmm.
first interaction. So then they have
Mm-hmm.
to stop and get beer, and Tucker and Dale have also stopped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Something I loved, and I notice every time watch this, I just notice another detail is the costuming. Because this is not a high budget film, but every outfit that those people were wearing was to a T.
Mm-hmm.
Chad and his white belt, the white studded belt. Do you remember, like in a popped collar, like
Mm-hmm.
those white dudes? Like that tells you everything you need to know about his
Mm-hmm.
character. But also like Dale with his giver hat on. I love that
Yeah.
hat. I want to buy one so bad.
I read a lot of romance. Let's just, okay. Read a lot of romance. So when I see giver, what I might perceive may not mean what
That's
that
what I thought
means.
too.
Okay, okay.
I think whatever you see is there.
Okay,
That's the beauty of horror. It's a wide open text.
okay.
But in a lot of ways, that's that's Dale. He's big old softy.
Mm-hmm. A big old softy. And paralleling Chad and Dale, Chad becomes the monster in this movie, but is framed as Dale, like Chad perceiving Dale as the monster.
Mhm.
But then I think about that interaction when he tries to kiss Allie. For me, like, I think that that's another place that sets Dale apart from Chad, just in terms of how respectful he was of Allie.
There's another scene that makes me think the same thing. I get like the giggles every time I think about this line delivery in particular, because what winds up happening is they get back on the road after Dale's failed attempt to say hello to the college girls with his scythe in his hand. Tucker says, whatever, let's go on to our vacation home. And they have bought the cabin that we see in the opening scene and they're going to fix it up. And I loved the scene where they get out. We see the cabin. They see something totally different than we do. They're like, it's a palace. It's a mansion.
When I tell you this movie was so funny to me,
No.
I was in stitches, like for real. Like, when you do that laugh, his sound doesn't come out. Like, there it
Yeah,
is.
it's like the perfect level of comedy or just humor, and it goes on a lot of levels. It's the stuff they say, it's the way they interact with each other, it's the way things look. Everything about that cabin screams like, "Don't go in there."
Right, right.
And it's literally booby trapped. They're like, "Oh, look, they were a news junkie or whatever," because it's got clippings of all the people the person
Yeah.
murdered who lived.
Well, wasn't it Chad's dad that
I think
lived
so.
there?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. And so Tucker and Dale, like, have this outlook on life that just can't be shaken. They're like, this is
Yeah.
great. This is the best day ever. I can't believe. And Tucker gets all emotional talking about having his vacation home. And they refer to it as a shared property. I mean, Tucker has bought it, but it's never any discussion that it also is Dale's because
Mhm.
they're best friends. Like, then they have been, we learn, since they were very small. But they get there and the first thing to do is go fishing, which is a religion to my people. And it turns out that the college kids have also decided to camp on this property.
Mhm.
I think we learn later that Chad picked it on purpose. One of them goes, "Let's go skinny dipping." Famous horror movie trope.
Yeah, yeah.
This is when the scene you're talking about with Chad coming on to Allison and not taking no for an answer.
Mhm.
I found like the way the scene was written and performed, like you could see, I could remember like times when you're like, is it actually safe to say no? I'm in the middle of the woods.
Yeah,
How do I get out of this?
yeah. How do I get out of this?
And so I was like, that's so deft. It was really well done that was still there, but it didn't break the fact that this is a comedy movie.
Yeah, it didn't. And you know what? After we learn what we learn eventually, I think we start to see some of these things that just say he's a little aggressive. Like, like I'm just thinking about other things of like how he responds to situations.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's a bit much. Okay. He says something about we're better than them, like
Yeah.
about the friends. And then also just kind of thinking about Allie and then like the differences between Allie and Chad. Allie's like, no, we're not better than them.
Her character also she's not a flat character. She gets to do some things, she gets to
Yeah.
grow, and she also has a function. Like she does things in this. But the first thing she does is almost kill herself which is a foreshadowing of what
Yeah.
happens to all of these fucking kids. I didn't know
Every
where this
last
was.
one of them.
It's genius. But Tucker and Dale are on the lake fishing, and they see Allie climbing up on the rock. She doesn't know they're there. She's getting naked. Tucker is eyeballing her. He's like, "Oh, there's a pretty girl there, and she's getting naked. Of course, I have to look at her." And Dale tries to cover his eyes, and Dale is sitting there like with his eyes covered, and screams at Tucker. Don't look at her. Leave her alone. Don't do that. And so that startles her, and she falls into the water. But there's a line that I love in that scene where Tucker says, "What are you doing?"
When you see a college girl prancing around in front of you half naked, you do not yell out my name. Well, you were being a peeping Tom.
Which is so simple and so like he didn't even say like you shouldn't do that. It was implied that that's
Hmm.
bad. You don't do that. And Tucker didn't even try to argue because he knew he was caught.
Hmm.
And I just really appreciated that, like Dale being someone who wasn't gonna jump at the opportunity to take advantage of you.
Right. Right. Again, showing that difference, highlighting that difference between Chad and Dale.
Yeah.
And then also in some ways Tucker and
Tucker,
Dale.
right? Tucker. That's another thing. It's like Dale is a better person than Tucker, and Tucker knows it, which we learn later.
Yeah.
They notice that Allie doesn't come back to the surface.
Yeah.
This was the second belly laugh when they fish her out of the water.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember what they said when they see the college kids over there?
Is that when they start yelling for them to go?
They go,
Ah, we got your friend!
not knowing that that's going to creep them out. And so the kids all run off. And they're like, what are you doing? She's hurt. She needs your help.
But then also, though, the thing that we didn't say was that by this time, Chad has told the story of the massacre.
Of the Memorial Day massacre.
So then just kind of wedging those thoughts in, solidifying some of those perceptions.
And then Dale is attempting he's giving mouth to mouth to Allison because she's not breathing. And so one of the kids says, he was eating her face. And so we're being shown the ways I think that like miscommunication, prejudice, preconceptions can tag team one another. They can dogpile and just make things worse and worse. And we learn later from Allison that what we're talking about is miscommunication, is a failure to take perspective.
Right.
Which I thought was pretty smart.
But also, I think that this movie makes sure that you don't miss what they're saying, like, because I think on one level, like these things were obvious, but then I think also they like make a point to say, this is what this is. This is miscommunication.
Yeah, the message exists at every level,
Yeah.
just for every viewer. And I
Yeah.
wasn't, I wasn't annoyed by that. Sometimes, sometimes it's not fun to have a movie explain itself to you, but they did just a touch of it in the dialogue
Hmm.
because,
Well, I also think the movie doesn't take itself seriously.
yeah, that helps.
Yeah.
It knows itself what it's doing.
Mhm.
When did you realize what was going on? Like what we, like at what point did the movie fully explain itself to you?
A point that was really pivotal was when the first kid died. It was so gory, but then beautiful at the same time. And not that something like that would be beautiful, but like the acting, the affect, all of this, the like just the detail in that scene.
Yeah, it was really complicated. And
Yeah.
that this happens on the very first day after Allison wakes up and Dale is trying to fix her breakfast. But because Dale isn't helping Tucker, Tucker gets himself into a mess. He's out here with the chainsaw. By the way, this is the most redneck shit. The way he's using every tool he uses is like, I was just like, don't do that. But it's also just, that's what we do. We will absolutely not read the manual. We will not follow safety procedures. The way he's just chucking the heaviest shit he can into the wood
Mhm.
chipper.
Chekhov's wood chipper and that. I saw that
Chekhov's wood
wood
chipper.
chipper
Yes,
and I was like, I already know what's gonna happen.
you did, but you also didn't because you didn't know how they were going to get in there.
No, I
That just
didn't.
like the high point of the film, arguably. So we cut. So, they're playing a trivia game. We learned something about Dale. Did this surprise
Uh,
you?
did it surprise me? I mean, I don't think anything about him
Yeah,
surprised me.
very unique person.
Yeah, yeah, very unique, very sweet.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we already had a hint that he loved board games, and
Mhm.
so that's pretty
Actually,
niche.
you know what? You know what? I take that back. I was surprised because when they said favorite board games, I'm thinking something like Brisk or Sorry.
I thought
When he
Monopoly.
pulled out the trivia game,
Yeah,
that did surprise me. Yes, that
yeah,
surprised me.
because I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So,
Yeah.
this is another trope we're playing with, which is that the hillbilly is stupid.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and and playing with a trope is fun. Sometimes all you have to do is reverse it. But I think there's a little more than that in here because it's not that he's some hyper capable, hyper genius that if we just simply put him in an office somewhere, he'd do fine. He is someone who has confidence issues because he knows that he's a redneck. Or they don't say redneck here, they say hillbilly, whatever. A lot of folks use it interchangeably.
I'm gonna look up the definition of the word trope. Okay, it says a figurative or metaphorical use of a word or expression.
In storytelling, tropes are just things that become so common that you can predict them and they're associated with the genre. So, you're a romance writer. There's classic tropes for,
There are classic tropes.
yeah,
They are, and the more I get into it, they're like micro tropes. Like what?
yeah, they're nuanced.
Micro tropes? Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so horror has its own tropes and killer hillbillies is one of them. Inbred
Mhm.
hillbillies, um, the, and also that they are stupid, that hillbillies are undereducated and stupid, which we do tend to be undereducated, but we don't tend to be stupid. And that's something that Allison points out is that there's a difference between.
Yeah, intellect and education. Yeah, that was a beautiful line.
Hmm. Yeah. And
That was a good line.
because she learns that he has a very precise memory. And so that was kind of fun to me because there's something I know plenty of undereducated rednecks who can tell you in minute detail how every kind of engine works. But while they're doing this, though, Dale is outside and he saws through a bee's nest.
Yeah.
I would say that this is like an inciting incident
Mhm.
because we get our first death. But there's another trope that happens, which is Tucker is running away from these bees and he's hanging on to the chainsaw.
Mhm.
The way he was moving, did you ever see Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
It's been a long time.
There's a a dance that he does at the end of one of the movies against the sunset. He's holding this chainsaw, he's spinning around in circles and dancing, and that's the way he was moving.
Uh-huh.
And so the kid was like, "This hillbilly's chasing me with a chainsaw, not we're both running from the same thing."
So I wondered, what is the character thinking in that moment? Like when Tucker runs by him, is he having a moment of realization?
I was gonna ask you the same thing because when I saw that, I was like, I think he
Yeah,
sees that Tucker's still going, and then the bee lands on his
yeah,
nose.
yeah.
And also, I don't know if you noticed that he's the only character voicing, like, just because they're these people that they're different to us in this way doesn't mean that they wanna kill us.
Mhm,
He's the
mhm.
only one, and eventually Chad and the others actually wear him down, and they get him amped up too, and I thought that was kind of like one of the ways that we control thinking about others. We saw that in The
Yeah,
Last of Us.
yeah.
I did have a thought, though. I'm like, I think he just put together what's happening.
I think yeah. I mean, it's almost. I think a piece of that is what made that scene. I love that scene. That
Yeah.
scene just communicated so
Mhm.
much, and I feel like the actor communicate, and it was like you could see the life drain from his
It
body
was
as the
really
scene.
good. It was a technical scene, too.
Yes.
We talked a lot in The Last of Us about how many steps you can take, how far you can go on a road before it's difficult to turn or almost impossible to come back. That character dying in that way, having that realization right before he died, to me felt like the death of common ground, the death of
Mhm.
these college kids' ability to see Tucker and Dale as humans, because no one ever does that again except for Allison. No one ever is tempted to see Tucker and Dale.
We hope you enjoyed our discussion on Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Join us next time when we continue with many more laughs and a lot more to say.